And we're live, Cloud Foundry After Dark, Sunday, November what, 16.
All the cloud that's fit to print.
Anything interesting happening Cloud Computing this week?
Dude, it's a mess. It's just a big ugly brawl. And Waters is in the center of it. He's just like throwing chairs and tables, smashing bottles on people. You know, it's like the old West.
I mean, nothing happened in cloud other than the fact that I spent the last 3 weeks straight doing 3 customer visits a day, and then Amazon Compute happened and all of the noise. But other than that, man, our space is dead.
Totally.
It
I
is.
was
I'm so bored right now. I don't even know what to do usually when I get to the office. I'm just
So
like,
we
never
should
in
push
the
this out there and see if we can get some more people to join us, but maybe we can start with this idea that platform as a service is not going to be adopted.
Wait, who said that?
I don't know, there's people retweet all this dumb stuff that gets published. I don't know.
platform as a service is not going to be adopted.
It's already been more adopted in 1 year than IaaS was in 4.
mm,
I think it's also interesting, and we can dovetail this into a bunch of these other threads, is that like platform as a service as a name is one thing, but then all the rest of the stuff that's going on around containers and orchestration, all these other services that keep coming down from Amazon and the rest of these ecosystems, they start to look suspiciously like platforms.
Yeah, look, it's not complicated. To an engineer, you're like, look, I want all of this infrastructure shit to be programmable. And in fact, I don't even want it to be programmable. I want it to be programmed, preferably by someone else who I never have to think about, or maybe just by a bot. That's platform. I don't care what you call it.
I think that the truth is that we're talking about, will it be adopted as a tiny primitive technology by individuals? And that is true. It's like the average local developer, local desktop developer right now is not using it. But I'd say the same is true for things like DigitalOcean and Amazon, etc. So I think that there's a huge adoption, and the thing that really was super popular for me the last couple of weeks is this idea we've been playing around with more and more around how much you can integrate into the containers it runs. And I think there's huge interest in accounts of what we're going to do with our metrics pipeline, and to say, hey, have this kind of performance, stop a canary deploy, it's not healthy, scale it up, scale it down. In some ways, that's not dissimilar from this kind of distributed event-based stuff we saw coming out of Amazon this week. It's just this idea of integrated events that help manage things. So it's a different, but it was super popular. Everyone was really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not new, right? Like, everyone remembers Yahoo Pipes, or maybe no one remembers Yahoo Pipes.
I played around with Yahoo Pipes.
Right? Like this idea of, oh, the internet as a collection of tiny pieces of code that run when events happen, like if this then that. Before that, there was Yahoo Pipes.
Wasn't that just called Node.js? Isn't that why it's called Node?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've all.
I actually liked Yahoo Pipes. I also was one of the people that liked XSLT.
Hell yeah, dude! I wrote some amazing XSLT. The whole like consume the pipeline, transform, respond, SAX parsing.
Homo iconic.
It's beautiful.
I'll tell you another quote that came from one of our friends, Josh, or one of our mutual friends. He said to me at drinks in New York City last week, he said, hey, we're really excited about Cloud Foundry because it's backed by the size of companies that can engage with us. If we pick some of these tiny little startups to engage with and putting our requirements on them, we would crush them like little tiny walnuts. And I think people forget that there is a segmentation in the market from what's fun to what you make a 10 or 20-year investment bet on. And it's, that when you were at a tiny company, right? You could say this, Josh. What's it like going to the market as Pivotal now with all Cloud Foundry behind you versus, Piston's doing very well, but it's not quite the same force.
Sure. I mean, we had customers who are like, hey, we're excited enough about OpenStack that we want you to deploy in 18 data centers in 9 countries at once. And we're like, oh, we don't have that many people. A lot of those countries we don't even know how to go to. Like, I'm sure we could get on a plane and figure it out, but yeah, I mean, there was a whole segment of the market that we couldn't go after effectively. And now, as Pivotal, I get to go visit those guys. And they're like, hey, we've got these giant OpenStack clouds, and we're sorry we didn't use Piston for them because that would have been fun to work with you. But, I mean, literally, come on. Like, there's no way you could have performed at that scale, especially year one. Remember, year one, we were 10 people. So, yeah, but Pivotal, we have enough people to go do those accounts. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's also kind of insane.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think somebody was a very happy customer and a big partner. They asked me, they're like, "Hey, how are you going to keep up with the innovation on Amazon?" They saw the stuff that came out of reInvent this week, and they want multi-cloud, they want all these things, but it was a fair question, and he was dead serious.
Because Amazon's going to give you multi-cloud, or because what?
No, I think the point was this was actually a large telco. And they even have their own cloud offerings, to be honest. But there's business unit pressure to just use Amazon because, like, even at the business unit, like when you have, even in if your company offers it, like the business unit pressure to just go deliver is getting so high, and the gradient between, public-private is so high. And Josh and I are notoriously pro-private cloud, right? Like we haven't given up on that.
I mean, that's what's interesting to me about Cloud Foundry is that, and I get pushback. I was talking to somebody last week about IaaS, and they're like, well, we still think it's all going to be public in the future. I'm like, you know what? Like, data gravity is a real thing. If you're deciding to be in one provider forever, then, that's a weird decision to make. How do you feel about your mainframe today? Because you've never been able to move all the way off of that, and what does that cost you now? Like, that's right, that annual bill has never gone down. So they're very long-term commitments to choose a tech platform that's a single vendor.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon is amazing, and if you go back in time, you'll remember that when I went to NASA, the goal of that project was to work with Amazon. We had the entire AWS executive team down to Ames, right? Jesse wrote the original blog on how to use AWS to actually build apps. It was the number one Google search.
To you the very first night I met you, dog, and pardon me for dropping the vernacular there, dog. But we were talking about policy-based cloud deployment. So, like, hey, there's this app policy. It should be on this profile of this cloud. Like, we were already talking about routing to different clouds based on profile the first day I met you.
Well, so I mean, I know some of this story. So chronologically, were you talking to Amazon before or after you decided to build infrastructure as a service? Because I remember the original story was to try to build a platform.
The goal was to build a platform. We started doing that on top of a VMware workstation account that we couldn't get to automate at all. We tried vCenter for about 6 weeks and gave up on that. And then we started using Eucalyptus. And it was actually about the time that we first downloaded Eucalyptus that we started talking to Amazon. And we're like, look, we want to tell the rest of the world to use Amazon if they can. We can't. You don't have FedRAMP. Your data sizes are way too small. You don't have enough bandwidth. Like, I know it's a great, big, giant cloud, but it's a toy compared to our workloads. So we're going to build a clone, but we're going to be AWS compatible so that our partners can use your infrastructure to do the same kind of workflows that we're doing. And we actually talked about what we could put in Amazon that didn't require FedRAMP and what public data sets we could share and stuff. So that was all about the same time. It was before we started, releasing it as OpenStack, but that was always part of the story. That first code base was always about the AWS APIs. It just made a lot of sense. But the idea that was
DevOps professional is in the building.
Nice. Heyo.
You gotta show your face a little bit, though.
Lighting, maybe.
He's a talking hairline.
All right, we got Brandon Burton. Why don't you introduce yourself real quick, Brandon?
Hey, what's up? Brandon Burton from, I guess now I'm at Lookout. But I've done some PaaS stuff in the past.
You used to run some Cloud Foundry over there at Mozilla.
I thought your name was familiar.
He is a reader.
He's navigating the family abode, I believe.
Yes.
We've done this dance before.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I worked with a fellow who was on the Mozilla infrastructure team for a while, but back when I was at Flock and worked on the Netscape browser before that. So I'm sure we know all the same people. Amy Lewis joined too. Well, we're gonna get the whole DevOps crew out.
So, Brandon, you're on mute. You know that?
Yeah, I was grabbing some headphones.
There we go.
There we go.
Amy's on mute.
So what do you see? You also do HangOps, DevOps, a bunch of this kind of crazy madness. So
Yeah.
how was you guys did an AWS reInvent HangOps this week, right?
Yeah, it was on Friday. It's like a recap. It was pretty good.
Yeah, the Ches Locke and the rest of the crazies.
Yeah, Cheslock didn't make it. I had Darren from
Abby!
Underdog and Jeremy Carroll from Pinterest. They joined. That was pretty good. It's kind of interesting seeing some of the new stuff that AWS is putting out, sort of PaaS-y, like Lambda, right, is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And some of
What's your
the...
take on that? We were making Yahoo Pipes jokes earlier, but what's your honest take?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's taking, in a way, the utility computing stuff to the highest abstraction. The idea that you can have like Node.js code that runs on demand in your build by the 100 milliseconds is pretty. It's like serious abstraction. It's certainly a limited rollout, right? But right now, the events only can be driven off DynamoDB, Kinesis, or S3 bucket changes. So if you're not hooked into those, it's kind of not useful yet. But as more stuff, as more like event inputs get rolled out and more like runtimes get rolled out, it should be really interesting.
I mean, it's always interesting to see kind of a new paradigm because it's totally abstracting away all the infrastructure aspects. But then are people ready to consume and write applications with that model? Because in some ways, it's also like basically now you're moving everything to kind of the stored procedure model where you have to think about how your data and these events interact, and that's basically where it's just a totally different paradigm for what most people do right now.
Well, it's the same as when we introduced event-driven programming, right? Like, I guess I'm old enough to remember that. People were like, we don't understand. How is this not linear? How is it not that my program has a list of things that happen and that's what happens? Now it's all going to be like, there has to be an event, and even if just the event is a timer going off over and over and over again.
But my point is that there's lots of paradigms for doing different kinds of programming and processing, and they tend to be dominant. Like you tend to have a Pareto distribution, and if people can't kind of adopt them, for whatever reason, whatever level of utility, then you just don't see them propagate.
By the way, on Sunday nights, every time Schaefer says Pareto distribution, you have to drink. Or Nash's equilibrium, you drink twice.
You just go ahead and say Nash equilibrium as soon as he says Pareto, because it's coming.
No, Pareto distributions and Pareto inefficiency are totally unrelated. So that's we got to clear that up.
Totally fair.
So I had a couple people ask me for an explanation. I was walking down the streets of New York, and I was actually on a call with our ops manager team. And we were talking about, at the time, some of the way we've written the code to configure Bosch for deployment on vSphere, and we had written some vSphere-specific functions versus abstracting them at the time to be neutral to vSphere or AWS.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really pretty impassioned conversation because there's a real debate of like, well, we did that to move faster to get the very first vSphere GUI out, and now we're having to go back and refactor it to also add Amazon to the GUI. Not the end of the world, but I put out this tweet that got about 50 retweets, which was use of Amazon-specific services has a name, and it's called technical debt.
Yeah.
And the reason I said that was not so much to poke a stick in the eye of Amazon, but I was literally going through an engineering call at that moment where we'd written code specifically for vSphere and specifically for Amazon, which we were having to spend weeks refactoring now to work on any cloud. And they were like, well, we took this technical debt, we got to pay down this technical debt, and engineers really like to pay down technical debt, etc. They like to make the abstractions. But it occurred to me that all these people running off and using Amazon specific services, it's really the same thing. It's like, hey, I got there faster. I did something quickly, but then when you want to have a long-term, potentially any cloud, multi-cloud, provider agnostic, use. It really is technical debt. So I don't know if people have well, some people in position saying the PaaS, people said, oh, it's all about lock-in. I didn't say lock-in. I said technical use. Those two are very different.
Hey, Schaefer, can you mute Rick just for a second because we're getting feedback on that channel. Thanks. Sorry, Rick. Just wave your hand when you got something. I mean, I think calling it technical debt is probably fair. I mean, it feels harsh saying, you know, anytime you've got short-term choices you make knowing that you're going to have to back them up in the long term. Yeah, okay, committing to any proprietary interface or any single vendor interface is going to produce some of that, right? It sort of comes back to the question you were asking earlier, though, is like, how do we keep up with the pace of innovation? The reality is, you know, the #1 most innovative company in cloud? IBM. And guess what? That doesn't matter. IBM files more patents every year in every area of technology than every other company in that industry combined. Innovation is not what wins. Relevant innovation is what wins.
You know, it's funny. So we did HangOps at 11, right? And then we spent a few minutes talking about the vendor lock-in with some of the stuff with AWS, especially like the new ALM stuff, right? The code deploy, code commit, code.
Yep.
What's the code something? Anyway, right? But it's like the CD, the Git hosting, and the sort of webhooks code push stuff.
Yep.
And then at 1 o'clock, I had like we had a bi-weekly ops all hands. We were talking about the same stuff because we're moving from, you know, many hundreds of hosts in a data center to many hundreds of AWS instances, but also we're looking at Azure and Google Cloud and just trying to look at our, you know, like do our due diligence and what we look at for cloud and multi-cloud. And so we talked about this from an engineering standpoint and how we evaluate these higher order things that AWS is putting out. And kind of our view right now is that if we look at something that, you know, and a lot of this is AWS specific, but like if AWS is offering us something currently now that isn't easy to engineer with off-the-shelf tools, and because that there isn't a compelling reason to try to build our own versus use theirs, we'll adopt it for now. And a good example was Elasticash's Redis failover support and their read replica. So in our testing so far seems to be pretty good compared to what you can do with Sentinel and with cluster off the shelf. So I think that's the approach we're trying to take, in that, like, you know, we sort of knowingly take on sort of a vendor technical debt, but but as each thing we look at sort of a build versus buy, and you know, so we try to make a conscious decision that we know that if at some point we do go multi-cloud in the future, or we, you know, decide we're going to move to another cloud, you know, like how locked in are we, kind of a thing.
That's a great point. I mean, I think it's really, if there's no other way of doing it that's better, you know, it may be lock-in, but it's probably the right call. And you know, it was about 11 o'clock in New York City, and one of my good friends that does a major Wall Street shop, runs cloud for them. He's like, I'm going to get a demo of your new high availability MySQL deployed with Bosch on Azure, on Amazon, and on OpenStack. And I'm going to blow people's minds because that's the way we have to go in the future. Right now, that kind of model is behind, but I'm going to do it. And I want to join the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and I want to make that the standard way of doing things. So I think we're, in a sense, the underdog, like unabashedly the underdog. But I think there are some interesting forces in the market that want some alternatives, Brandon. So that a year from now, maybe we have a shot of something that you guys would objectively look at and go, no, that's an option too.
Hey, Amy, what do you think? We haven't heard from you on this topic yet. Just the general rant on, you know, is the world of open cloud worth investing in, or is it fine to just, you know, get in bed with Amazon and hope they don't have herpes?
Are you into hybrid cloud, Amy?
Oh, the cloud herpes question. Always the protection. Always. No, I mean, I think we've gone, like, with all the announcements last week, I think we've gone from a place where people think of it still as a science experiment to quietly people considering AWS for enterprise, but we'll see. I mean, some of the people making the purchasing decisions are defending their fort in terms of their own job security. So I'm a practical person always. So in spite of what's good for the business, it may be some defense of territory before we see real change and shift.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always worth following the money, being like, who's losing out? James, you love to tell this speech, right? Like, how are vendors who can't help themselves going to help you?
That's why it's boring, but I talk about our revenue growth rate, right? Like I tell people about it, and one of the things I'm most proud of is that we're not a marketing company, right? We're not out here, giving away stickers at conferences, and we're really trying to move the needle with major enterprises so that they have a different option. And in some ways, I think that's important in some segments of the market to have that kind of momentum. Sandeep, what's in your mind? Does people know that Sunny is now running the data side of Pivotal?
Boom!
Boom, that happened.
I don't know, but yeah, I guess they do now.
They do now. The 11 people that watch our Sunday night hangouts know all about it now.
It's gonna get all over the internet.
Oh yeah, they can't wait to.
Yeah, I mean, look, let me look at it from kind of the point of view where I'm looking at it from now, James. Right, obviously still mobile, and we can talk about that. But I think over the last 10 days, as I've been talking to people, James, like the number one thing that people are thinking about when it comes to these data services, like how can they be cloud enabled and how can we deploy them there, right? And I think the interesting question that's coming up there is that there is a set of hardware, not to take it to that level, but there's a set of hardware that runs cloud really well and a different set of hardware that runs a lot of the data products really well. And what is the intersection of those two things, and how can those two things play well together, right? And so, I think what's really important for us is, we're gonna double down on obviously our services on PCF. That's important for us, but beyond that, we're really just thinking of how to make those available for production use cases, right? Not sort of just dev and test right now.
Yeah, but I do think that there's a huge desire to have alternatives of multi-cloud data services, right? I think that's the whiplash that's coming in the market, right? Like Amazon's certainly going to get a lot of early quick wins, but I think there's going to be a community that really expects multi-cloud. And not to switch topics, but there was, 20 years ago, Microsoft really ruled Seattle.
Hey, before you come in on because I know you're going to go where you're going next, and I want to give that full play. But does everyone know who Rick Kay is? And I'm so glad he joined. And we muted you just for a second there, Rick. But are you out of the closet? Can we talk about what you're doing right now, or no? Just chilling on the couch. Schaefer, can you unmute Rick? There you go.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Awesome, I got you now. Are you having fun yet?
Yeah, sure, I suppose. Yeah, I have time.
Can I give them a little brief preamble, or is that cool, or do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right, so Rick was the chief enterprise architect at USDA, who successfully deployed OpenStack there. And not just deployed, but actually I believe this is the first FISMA High certified cloud environment in government, using Piston OpenStack.
Certified and accredited.
You certified and accredited, using Piston OpenStack, using VMware Nicira, and using Arista gear, I believe, and a bunch of Silicon Mechanics hardware.
No, we're using Nicira, now NSX, coupled with Piston OpenCloud and Cisco gear, unfortunately. I wish it were Arista, but it's a bit too far.
So, I've been chatting with Rick a lot this week, trying to get some advice from him and input into kind of how Pivotal is looking at the federal space. This is one of those big debates of public versus private cloud as well, because the government has been thinking, cloud means public cloud. Ergo, we've all got to go just buy Amazon. How do we figure out how to do that? Maybe we're the CIA and we get Amazon to stand up a new Amazon cloud for just us. Or we don't use Amazon, but we tell people we're using Amazon and we call it cloud. Somehow we use more SharePoint. And, CF, we're getting a lot of pull now for for federal environments and intelligence community environments, and the number one thing they ask for is what Rick knows how to do, which is how do you get it certified and accredited for these weird environments. So I had asked him if he had time to just jump in on one of these calls and talk a bit about, what does it look like? What does cloud look like from the White House side of the fence, or the weird, spooky government side?
Sure. Well, it looks confusing. Like you said, AWS is kind of the 800-pound gorilla out there. It's the thing that everything compared to. It's the thing that everybody knows. You have to take into account that the government is 5 to 10 years behind on technology and so forth. So when they think future, they're looking at what was 5 years ago. And when you go and you talk OpenStack or software-defined networking, you can barely broach PCA, for example. Most of them have probably no idea, if any idea, what's being discussed. And it's really an interesting conversation to have. When demonstrating OpenStack with software-defined networking to a number of organizations, we've been to, I think, 27 different organizations and agencies, to include Delta Force in the basement of the Pentagon somewhere, and DHS, the VA, and so on and so forth. They're all pretty amazed with it. I'll quote the CIO of USCIS after we demonstrated to him. He said, "This is magic. How did you guys do that?" So they do love it. They don't necessarily understand it, but they know that it's what they want, because when you look at what is required in the federal space, here recently there's been a lot of movement. The DoD CIO, for example, just recently opened up the Department of Defense to using cloud services, and remove the restrictions, which used to be you had to go to Department of Defense authorized data centers first, and if they authorized you to leave, then you could, which they of course never did. Mm-hmm. That policy changed about a month ago, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't remove the requirements that Josh had mentioned earlier, called FISMA, the Federal Information Systems or Security Management Act from 2002 or something. And what that is all the various controls that the government requires their systems to have. So they still can't necessarily go to an Amazon. And so what we had built over in the Department of Agriculture was an OpenStack-based cloud using software-defined networking, originally as Nicira in 2012, subsequently NSX. We met all those controls. It was pen-tested and run through all the documentation drills and certified, and is now accredited and qualified.
Yeah. I mean, this is, James was sort of pointing out that, not everybody is using PaaS at their home, or whether we call it platform or platform as a service or whatever. But I think we see this in the places where they have the most pain in terms of how they procure and run infrastructure today. They're the early adopters because they really, really hate how they do it now. When you talk about folks seeing OpenStack and thinking it's amazing, well, OpenStack was amazing 5 years ago. It's actually kind of what I would consider to be bare bones normal, not even really tolerable at this point without some platform tools on top.
I agree with that.
But they have so much pain. Like, anything is better than the way they used to do it. I think that's why we're seeing, to James's point, most of the adoption of CF right now is in these huge enterprises. And, they've got 30,000, 40,000 developers in one company. And that's because the pain they're dealing with is massive. I mean, I don't know. Is anyone else doing this? I spend all my time talking to those people, so maybe that's what the world is like.
I did a crazy thing, Josh. I haven't talked to you since. I had to talk to 1,500 people in the federal government at an event called FedScoop.
Yeah, well, I still haven't heard about your FedScoop talk.
So I was all nervous because, I don't have a federal specialization at all, like financial services, manufacturing, tech, web scale.
You're an old Sun guy. Everybody knows you're an old Sun guy. It's cool.
I'm just an enterprise guy. I am. But Fed is a very specific bent and has a lot of its own jargon and everything else. So I just got up and gave my normal like, "Hey, you better change or you're done" talk. And the hilarious thing was, just a quick anecdote. HP had gone before me, and the way people talk to the federal IT buyers is so boring. They had said HP helps the federal government innovate because we moved them from Windows XP to Windows 7, like the Navy desk. And I got up, and I'm like, you know what? Your security is going to suck if you can't move fast. You know who learned that? The French. They had a Maginot Line. And they built up all this hard outer shell static security, but they couldn't rapidly redeploy their army. And guess what happened? Change destroyed them. And they were all caught with their pants down. And I said, if you don't enable your developers to be productive, all these initiatives you have are all going to fail. Like, they're not going to, you're going to have this more classic failures, your iteration period. And I didn't get booed off stage. In fact, like, trying to leave the place, like 20 people came up to me to talk. So I think federal, you know way better than I do about it, but it's pretty interesting to see that even there, the idea of cloud agility is starting to get real. And a lot of people came up to me and said, hey, we really want you on our Amazon cloud. We've got this Amazon cloud in federal, but we want this layer too. And that was really popular. So my 2 cents, I think they feel like they want to participate in this, and Amazon has actually helped get them kind of their appetite whet.
Yeah, there's a pretty significant community. I've worked at the Department of Defense, and now I'm with the Department of Agriculture within federal space, and they are very, very interested in cloud and probably have been for some time, but have been restricted by bureaucracy and rightful protection for decades. From moving to some other form of service provider. But that's starting to loosen up. So I'm not surprised at all that folks came up to you after your presentation, because there really are a good number of smart individuals, whether they're federal employees or contractors, that work within the federal government, but have been held back from actually being allowed to be innovative. A lot of the folks that run the organizations, the data centers, or the commands that control IT, come from an era that is quite old compared to what we're seeing today with rapid iteration, 6-month releases on the new platforms and softwares, and they have kind of a protectionist syndrome around them, and they want to do things kind of the old way. And this kind of threatens that paradigm, right? Coming out with new things all the time. But the young kids coming out of school and the folks that are in there in the trenches working, they feel the pain of sitting around doing something that they've been doing for the last decade, right? Virtualizing something, creating PaaS by way of having a systems administrator or whatever you want to call them. Manually installing an application on top of an operating system and managing it is a significant amount of work and unnecessary.
I think another thing
so they know that.
Some of this is if you're have a credit card and you can afford 10 cents an hour, then no matter what you do at work, you can go home and launch servers on EC2 or with Vagrant on your laptop. So then it just becomes that much more conspicuous when you have to go through your day-to-day grind, when you can do that with basically you can simulate any cluster you want on a laptop or with very little amount of money on one of these public providers.
Well, that's one of the things that keeps getting thrown in the faces of the leadership, if you will, in these organizations is that people will quote just that. They'll say, look, I can go home, I can take out my credit card and go to AWS and deploy as many VMs as I want, but here I have to fill out a form that takes forever, and 30 days later I get a VM and it's quasi-useful, right? So yeah, it's a big problem, but it's starting to be the dam is starting to break on it. I think it's actually going to break pretty fast here pretty soon. With the Department of Defense opening the doors, they used to use them because obviously they have the most strict policies. the senior management, the security people, or whatever you want to call them, would use the Department of Defense as a place to point at and say, look, they can't let anything out because their stuff's so secure, and then those places are not. And then now they've gone ahead and opened that up, and within 24 hours, and I'm not joking, of the memo from the DoD CIO coming out, we had a meeting, and we had some customers that called in and had said, hey, did you notice the people we were citing as the pinnacle of security and so on and so forth said cloud's just fine. And they're all pushing for that now. So all of the departments are going to start opening up the gate.
So you have a lot of perspective that I don't necessarily have. I'm just curious what you see in that space around, what even more forward-leaning things like the Docker and container discussions that are happening.
There's a limited amount of Docker containerization, LXC, I guess, stuff out there. That is, I think, we see something that might be still yet a little bit of a bridge too far for them. Just the concept of kind of self-determined IaaS is already starting to shake things up, much less going into containerization and then layering PaaS on top of that.
Anybody who talks about putting a container on bare metal who works in a highly secure environment should be shot in the face. Or, as the internet pointed out, they should be hit in the head with a shovel, which is what people suggested we should do to James. But honestly, it's a trivial exploit to explain to people, look, if you have bus mastering, you can own the firmware on anything on the PCI bus fairly trivially. If you own the firmware on the video card, the next time you reboot that machine, you own the whole host. The only good protection against that attack right now is the hypervisor. Use VMs. They're like the condom of your cloud computing environment.
I like that transition.
Abby, get it. This moment to be there for her to speak up.
I was like going for that one. I'm like, if Josh is going to open it up, I'm totally going in. I think security, honestly, is the best story with federal, and honestly, even expanding past that to energy and utility. Mm-hmm. I was at a nuclear IT strategic leadership conference this past summer, and there were 2 sessions on cloud and 1 on PaaS. They were literally offering up PaaS as the way to mitigate security concerns coming into nuclear facilities, particularly ICS and SCADA solutions.
That is the difference between VMs on demand and a platform that facilitates everything you do, but also knows everything you do. Very different paradigms.
And these are sessions that were held by the contractors for the DoD and the government, and there's like, this is the option to really get around some of these concerns with security threats coming in the door. So I think, honestly, building on FISMA, obviously, Josh, we're going to talk a lot about FISMA compliance soon, but building on that and then really kind of taking that to the next level with the energy and utility space and building that story out as PaaS being a way to not only have the agility around development, but also ensuring the consistency of the environments for security.
So I had a lunch with a member of a 3-letter agency that is based somewhere in, I'm not even going to say. Let's just say one of the intelligence community agencies. I'm not sure how badly I'll piss him off. I'm sure I haven't broken any rules, but cool guy, member of the OpenStack community, and we were talking about this exact issue of, how do you use PaaS to get more secure than IaaS will provide you or other cloud constructs will provide you. And I pointed out that the problem with a BYOC model, a bring your own container model, is you have no idea what's in the container image. And it's basically the same problems you have with IaaS. If you let people upload their own disk images, you have no idea what are in them. And if you let people SSH into them and download arbitrary code, you're back where you started. You're, in fact, in a worse position because you need to start with a standard gold master. The nice thing that a build pipeline, like what you've got inside Cloud Foundry, gives you is you can have 100% audit of everything that's in your running environment. The OS, the language, the framework, the app stack, and the application code, all of it went in through an automated process that gives you an audit trail. There is nothing else we do in cloud that gives you that construct. So, and I was pointing out, you can run this offline. You can use offline build packs, you can use an offline CF install, and you can have a 100% disconnected from the internet and fully auditable app dev stack. I don't know anything else that's close to that. He was excited. Yeah, I got the best security requirements from them too, because they've already lived this, and they're like, and here's this problem we had back in Nam, not quite, but similar. This is Schaefer's term earlier.
Josh is using condom and brutal warfare metaphors tonight.
Back in Nam with the napalm. No, security is war, man. International internet warfare. It's scary business.
Okay, so the prediction though is that a more integrated platform could actually help them be more secure and more productive, and could change the paradigm from we need to move slow and put people in between each step to we could actually automate and have policy and have computers do a little bit of thinking about security.
You can fight APT.
Actually, enforceable policy, not just policies, enforceable policies.
Computers are actually better at auditing this stuff than humans are.
That's right.
Right. Well, one of the things that we found is in our deployment of OpenStack, and it has led to the natural evolution of a PaaS platform, Cloud for Foundry, is the security concerns around it. So if you give them an IaaS platform, well, they can do whatever they want. Well, absolutely. The way to control that, if you want to call it that right now, is by simply controlling the public images that they're allowed to use with the OpenStack framework. But my partner and I have seen for over a year now that Cloud Foundry and a PaaS platform is the way to go, because not only do you control the operating system that runs the virtual machine underlying it, but you also can control the runtime libraries on top. Then thereby you can go ahead and control the security of the platform. In conversations with the DHS here recently, for example, they love the OpenStack IaaS platform, but they have wanted to see something a little bit better. Really what they were asking for without knowing it is something like what Cloud Foundry provides.
Yeah. I mean, the litmus test right now is just say, look, guys, when Poodle hit, did you have a mechanism of updating all of the applications that are hosted in your data center without scheduled downtime or without calling the app devs and having them do something? Because if you didn't, you need platform.
Yep.
So we had some things that happened last week that we never really get to, and we still have a little bit of time, 10 minutes left. We haven't really had a good Cloud Foundry After Dark about the OpenStack Summit, and then there's been a bunch of stuff about .NET. So maybe we can try to, and we don't have to have a hard stop at the top of the hour, but maybe we can get to some of these ideas.
What about you talk about .NET? Because everyone else is talking about you talking about .NET.
I mean, all that happened was, I've been talking a little bit about how Microsoft is behind for about the last year. And my stump speech on it, I feel very secure in saying, is that Microsoft's closed ecosystem without an IP commons to bring in the best of the best from across the ecosystem of the new trends resulted in them largely missing out on the big trends around containerization, cloud, and big data, because things like C groups came to Linux from Google. Amazon built everything out very natively with much more like a Linux stack, which ends up supporting Windows, but is in no ways tied into what, it's not built on Windows in any meaningful way. And the whole Hadoop ecosystem and all the things that are coming out with, new data systems, largely you're starting Linux first. And so almost everything in the world right now is starting Linux first in terms of innovation. And they've tried to cover up this flesh wound by offering Linux as a service on Azure and then saying, hey, we support X because we run it in our Linux container on Azure only, which is, I think, a pretty weak statement. So when Cade's been reading some of my tweets, he's a really smart guy, and Microsoft called him up and they're pitching, oh my God, we're now going to do containers, and we made some comments on that, and we said, yeah, where is that? Doesn't actually exist. Is that 2 years out? This is pre-announcement where. And so suddenly, Pivotal is the important recognized source there. And then secondarily, they came out and said, we're going to open source .NET. And I was like, hey, this is exactly what I was telling you, man. They're behind, right? Like, they don't have an IP commons for the best ideas to thrive, and so they're playing catch up. And he did a really generous thing, was he put 8 quotes from me in the Microsoft announcement, because I think he just saw prima facie that what I was saying was true, right? That they are completely in chase mode right now. And the final close of the article was like, why not open source Windows? Because these frameworks, they work with things that are embedded in the operating system, if you haven't noticed, right? There's some fundamental things going on in operating systems that these frameworks and development environments require access to. So if you're
let me tell an evil story. Okay.
Hit me.
In the day Netscape browser, in 8.0, when the story of the Netscape browser for 8.0 was that we embedded IE in Firefox. Never mind whether or not this was actually a good idea, this was the idea of AOL, and this is what we built. And this was after the antitrust settlement had gone through, and so in theory, anything that represented an antitrust, anti-competitive behavior by Microsoft around the browser could be resolved. There was a legal framework for it. In practice, what this meant was there were 3 people at AOL who had seen the IE source code, and they were tainted. They were forever barred from ever working on a browser. But they were our resource. If we had a question about these secret API calls that were required to actually make embedded IE work, we could call this team, who could call Redmond, who would look it up, who would call them back, and they would transfer it to us. But all on phone calls, so there was like no paper trail, literally. But we coded for 18 months using an embedded IE renderer and a whole library of secret, undocumented API calls that you had to use this weird legal procedure to get access to. This is what .NET lives with. This is why you point out, oh, well, maybe you would
but like the frameworks integrate so deeply into the OS, and if you can't change any of that or really understand what it is, you're not going to do as many of the aggressive things on it.
Yeah. You get yourself into a world of hurt too. We almost got sued by Microsoft right after the browser came out, because in that process, we're trying to make it render XML properly, right? Because in the days, XML was cool, this was important, so we're writing to the registry for MIME-type entries and all this weird black magic you've got to do in Windows, and we did it wrong, because it's undocumented, it's secret API codes, and it meant when you uninstalled Netscape, you broke the ability to render XML in IE. And Microsoft, we thought we had done this on purpose and was going to sue AOL over it. This is just like, you're playing with fire when you're using undocumented APIs. So .NET being open source without Windows being open source, that's like, you're playing with fire.
And Cade was smart enough at Wired to have Microsoft PR not feed him a bunch of BS about how this changed everything, and he called them out on that.
Yeah.
So bottom line, wouldn't it be great for .NET and Windows to support containers that Cloud Foundry can manage? And
there's 2 different things here. One is just fundamental kernel level visibility for developers using Windows in a way that they've never had before, which I think they're lacking. And then 2, the other thing they're behind on is just the containerization story. I mean, I have to look so many serious enterprises in the face and say, we're going to support Windows as a platform, but you're giving up on so many features that are native to Linux, like the elegance of IP tables for our kind of last mile firewalls for the our orchestration. You're giving up on the C groups and namespaces and the UFS and all the things that are happening there. You're saying, yeah, I'll wait 2 years for that. And unless you have some serious development benefits, you're also paying per node and having audit trails and licensing and inelegance in terms of just manageability of your fleet. So I've had PaaS architects from major financial services firms stand up and yell at their dev teams or the infrastructure teams saying, why do we continue to do .NET work if this ecosystem is as stunted as it is? And by the way, I believe Michael, I don't know if he's allowed to introduce himself.
Yeah, I think he is.
Remember him, Josh? He was sitting next to us at the big.
I know who Michael is. Michael, are you okay if we out you? Jennifer, you should unmute him.
He's muted himself. He
Okay.
can mute himself. I can probably.
We won't mention you're there. I don't think he realizes he's on the broadcast link and not the view link.
He's unmuted now.
Okay. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Josh. How you going?
Doing well.
Hey,
thanks.
James.
Hey, what's up?
What do you think? What was the biggest news for you in the last week? Was it the AWS Lambda stuff? Was it Waters being mean to Microsoft?
It wasn't mean.
I think the Lambda stuff was fascinating, and there was a tweet today about the function call being the unit of currency now for cloud. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
The fact that the container service has got a Mesos backend, I thought was interesting. And don't really care about the Microsoft stuff, but
It's vaguely interesting. You know, the first people to promise me what Lambda supposedly actually does is the libcloud guys. Actually, they came to Super Happy Dev House 42, I think, which was at the Rainbow Mansion, and maybe it was 36 or something. It was an earlier one. And they showed up and they're like, "Hey, we're building a cloud thing." And I've been working on OpenStack, so I was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. What sort of cloud thing are you doing?" Like, we're gonna write a library in Python where you just write a function and then it runs somewhere in the cloud.
Is this Polvi and these guys, or who are we talking about?
No, this is before Polvi. This was Polvi was still doing CloudKick at this point. I don't remember who this was.
But didn't CloudKick, they picked up libcloud at some point in that story?
Yes, but this is before that.
Okay.
I don't remember who the guy was. He was so like bright-eyed and was like a two-person startup. I was like, "That's the coolest thing ever. How are you going to do it?" They're like, we don't know. It doesn't work. I built it this weekend.
I mean, we kind of had this model before with stored procedures on databases.
Yeah, it's a great model. You know, it's just hard to make it have the right set of primitives. Amy, you've been quiet for a while. What do you think? .NET? True, false, good, bad?
I'm just enjoying the story. I'm enjoying the narrative.
I mean, I do want there to be containers on Windows. Let's just get that out there.
Yes.
Like what we do now is not containers on Windows.
No. But why do you want that, Schaefer? I mean, really?
Because there's all these people that use .NET. I mean, if they're going to stop using .NET, then use Linux, and we could do that. But that just doesn't seem.
If Microsoft thinks .NET is important, but them owning the source code is not, why don't they just become contributors to Mono? They could probably fix Mono in like 6 weeks. And then we could just take all that .NET and run it on Linux.
I'm down with that.
It wouldn't actually work, but it's a great dream.
I mean, I think that's part of the problem is if you're looking at the .NET ecosystem, kind of to James's point a moment ago, so much of that is deeply tied into other aspects of the operating system and the services in that ecosystem that you can't just port it to Mono and expect it all to work. You basically have to have those things running on Windows hosts to get access to the rest of that ecosystem.
Mono plus SQL Server.
That probably gets you the 80-20 rule, right? That probably gets you
SharePoint.
So mono plus plus, right?
Mono plus plus. It's like Mono, except you don't feel like you're dead. You're actually just, your throat hurts and stuff. But you can get up and walk around.
And then since we missed a week, Josh, you never gave us a debrief on the what kind of chatter was there at the OpenStack Summit about Cloud Foundry and the different people wandering around in Paris.
Yeah, actually, so I was only there for half the week, 2.5 days, and I did a ton of customer meetings. So I went to, I think, 2 talks at all, but I did go to Catherine Spence's talk. She's at Intel IT. She gave a great Cloud Foundry talk on Cloud Foundry on top of OpenStack, why they had decided to go ahead and add PaaS to their IaaS platform, how they rolled it out, and she had a lot of good information on cultural transformation. That was her whole pitch, was like, how do you take an IT org and get them adopting PaaS in a meaningful way? And so she did a really smart thing that we've now been briefing a couple of our other customers on how to do, which is she surveyed everyone. She said, what kind of apps do you have? What languages are they in? Are you doing real Agile now? Are you pretending to do Agile? When you say Agile, do you mean test-driven development and pair programming, or do you just mean you don't really have a QA team and you don't really write down your requirements? And then she took, of the 600 people that applied, she picked 48 teams that actually got accounts. She basically picked teams that she thought that they thought would win, and then they helped them a lot to come up to speed and use the platform successfully. I thought it was a great narrative. The slides are
So
up.
she sort of pre-qualified people that you had to be this tall to ride the ride.
Exactly.
These
You
are
must
all-
be this tall to ride Michael.
These are all internal? This is all
Totally
internal projects?
Huh?
These are all internal projects?
Yeah, Intel IT just serves the inside of Intel. I mean, Das Kamut built their OpenStack cloud over a couple of years, right? He's done keynotes on that previously. Catherine has taken over that project and put PaaS on top. I also got to sit in on the Open Contrail advisory board, which was really lucky because I'm supposed to be on that advisory board, but I thought I had to leave for the airport, so I managed to catch the first half of it. And this was part of this whole narrative that was like half of the week for me was people saying, how are we going to use Cloud Foundry to build NFV? Because we realized we can't get all the way to NFV using just OpenStack. And all the big telcos are like, this is our big bet now. NFV is what keeps us in the game. It's what keeps us from losing to Google. And I didn't even realize Google was the enemy here. But they're like, look, Google can roll out voice and text messaging. They've got devices. They've got a mobile OS. They're just cutting us out of the middle.
Over the top.
Over the top is actually the end of our world. So they're trying to figure out how to stay relevant, and NFV is their holy grail. So I read the spec, and a bunch of those guys are now saying it's Open Contrail plus Cloud Foundry plus OpenStack, and we're going to figure out how to make all this work. What they're trying to do is a little crazy, so I'm a little scared there, actually. Could work.
Explain what NFV is for the people at home.
Network functions virtualization. So the idea being there's all these, let's say you've got a cable TV provider, and so you've got a box mounted on the side of your house, and there's either a cable or a phone cord or a fiber cable coming into that box, and you think it's sort of, you know, where your internet comes out or where your cable TV comes out. They think it's actually part of their cloud. And they want to think about running a cell of Diego or a cell of Cloud Foundry on the box on the side of your building, as well as at the Metro Pop, which is a sort of powered pedestal that's maybe 6 blocks away, as well as the sort of municipal CO, which is the building they own downtown somewhere, and pushing applications. So the router, the voicemail app, the prepaid billing app for your cell phone minutes, a parental controls app that gives you like a web GUI that lets you filter what websites your kids can see on your internet connection. All of those as VMs that are orchestrated somehow, what they call service chaining, so that they connect virtual network connections between these VMs, and that they run in between their central data centers and all the way down into this POP on the side of your house. So for them, they want their ecosystem of vendors who sell them all this stuff today, like that parental controls app, they buy as a physical appliance from Ericsson, and then they run around the whole world and put them into every one of these little Metro POPs. They don't want to do that anymore. They just want to have, you know, a half rack of Cloud Foundry on OpenStack, and then just deliver VMs remotely that have all of these different pieces of software. And they want to update them remotely, and they want them to chain them together, and they want to provision them when you buy that service, and deep provision them when you cancel that service.
So that's just orchestrating a bunch of VMs. Where's the NFV part?
So the VMs themselves are the network functions. So the problem is, it's easy to have a VM that serves an app. It's hard to have a VM that serves, say, a layer 7 firewall, or even layer 4 firewall. So because it's got to be wire speed, which means it's got to have good access to the hardware that provides real-time fair share compute. So the
VMs, the function of the VMs is filtering these flows, basically.
Yeah, they're part of the data path of the network. They're not part of the control path. So they're literally saying, hey, all these things that used to be boxes are now going to be virtual machines, and they're going to be chained together, which means our data path is SDN that goes in between a bunch of VMs and then out to real physical networks. Yeah, now Amy's tearing.
I believe Amy's being trolled by Chris Hoffman. Now that we're in network function virtualization, I don't think she can escape this conversation.
Cisco's got some really cool stuff they're doing inside OpenStack.
I mean, developer productivity, obviously Cisco's never heard of a developer, but network functions. Could Padmasree do a Hello World? I really want to. I sometimes when I hear Cisco's leadership talk about like PaaS, I have to. Like they have amazing like WebEx uses Cloud Foundry, and the next generation of SaaS people use Cloud Foundry, but sometimes the classic leadership there, man, it's like they think the world stops at layer 4.
Oh no, they could do a Hello World, but you'd have to log in.
Amy, with that great introduction, would you like to go on the record for your employer?
No.
No
that
comment.
that would be a layer 8 problem, and I'm not going there.
Cisco's leading the charge on some of the hard policy stuff, actually. 'Cause the scary part of this, when you look at CNA and what Rick's talking about from a sort of FISMA standpoint, using cloud to do better at security, and then you look at using cloud to drive your entire network, including the sort of the security parts of the network, like the firewalls and the ACLs and the ingress, egress, and everything. Now who's allowed to access your cloud and do what to the settings, because it becomes incredibly important. And when more and more it's apps talking to infrastructure, talking to apps, talking to infrastructure, you kind of want those policies to make sense, and you need a really, really readable grammar. You can't have it be product specific and device specific anymore. I mean, the way we do it now is some guy logs into every top of rack switch and changes a setting. And he has a runbook where he writes down every switch as he goes, and he goes through every switch in the data center, and eventually he falls asleep at his desk, and then your internet goes down. But
I
we
think
can't
you
do it
need
that
more
way
than
anymore.
that, though, Josh. You need intelligent routing. And I think that's where the next big frontier is on the network side, is doing intelligent routing on top of that. So there's actually intelligence behind not just the platform and the tools, but the software that's doing the routing.
Yeah. Now, Juniper would tell you they solved this with QFabric.
No,
Cisco will tell you they solved this with ACI. I will tell you that none of the things that have been invented to date have solved this, otherwise people would actually use them the way they've been designed. Rick probably has a real world in the trenches view of this one. You hate them all equally?
Well, go ahead.
He said you hate them all equally.
Yeah, I suppose so. There's some stuff coming though. I ran into that I think will help address this in the next. Probably start being a little bit more well known in the next 6 months or so.
So we're moving into hour 2 here in the Cloud Foundry After Dark.
Hour
We,
10.
Do we want to keep it rolling, or do other people have stuff to do and get ready for work tomorrow? Any parting shots or words of wisdom? Oh, we got Rodrigo. Oh, that's another 10 minutes right there.
You know what? That was like, and one more thing.
One more thing. There's Flores.
Rodrigo, what have you seen on the road? I saw you were in Asia, you were at reInvent pouring bourbon for Accenture. What's the view from Accenture Cloud Platforms? Why is this leadership?
Let's see. I did it Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, Jakarta, some other countries in 5 days. Somebody asked me, why did I do that? I said, I forgot I'm not 30 years old anymore.
I did 3 cities a week for the last 3 weeks, but I'm still a young pup at 36 here, man. I still have some miles left on the tires. But
yeah,
I'm pretty empty tank after
I did 5 days in five countries in 5 days.
Jesus, man.
So, but any cloud teachings, Sensei?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, the Snowden affair, the whole NSA, really freaked out the Asians. They all want local data centers from their local telcos. They don't trust Americans. They shouldn't, obviously. So so that actually changed. I was at reInvent, and Amazon put an awesome show. I mean, really, we spent tons of money on it. It's great. I mean, they did a great job. But the fact of the matter is that people want to be spied locally.
I like to be spied upon by the people that I trust the most.
Hear globally, spy locally.
Exactly. I mean, the French, it's like this. The French, they know, look, we're French, so they all want to be spied locally. So whatever is happening with Amazon, Azure, Google, the fact there's a limiting factor called the NSA.
Enemies close and your spies closer?
Yes, they don't want to have Americans, and our values, which, are a little funky. So yeah, that was interesting. So what that translated for me was, in every country was like, when are you going to integrate our cloud into your cloud of clouds? So yeah, I've got a lot of work to do.
Rodrigo, how does open source play into that message? I mean, I was over in Asia not long ago, meeting with the president of a national IT agency, and talking about the fact that they're running OpenStack at scale because they feel that, at least they know what's in it. And they're looking at Cloud Foundry for sort of the same reason. They're like, well, it's open source, we can look at it ourselves.
Nobody I talked to mentioned open source, because open source comes down in two flavors, right? The truly broke, who can't afford shit from America.
And they don't buy anything from us anyway, so I don't care about them.
Exactly. Or the ones who are really up at scale, right? In which case they don't want to pay VMware fees, right? For which then open source is really economically viable. No, nobody talks open source. Nobody. But I'll tell you, funny story.
We're being jammed by the NSA.
Yeah, no, that's a funny story, which is the place that I work at right now, and which you guys know, but I won't say in this video in case the NSA is went all proprietary. That didn't work. That they went all open source. And when I brought them back, it's like, no, we got to be in the middle, somewhat commercial and somewhat open source. And
so, do you prefer the term profit positive or Canada code? Because these are the two ways I like to describe this in the middle, right? It's either we're partly socialist, partly capitalist, or it's like, there's nothing that wrong about being kinky, which is sort of the profit positive angle, which I'm not selling as well as the Canada code one, obviously. But
I'm not sure you sold Canada all that well either, to be honest. But
hey, what? We have the best of both worlds. We have the best socialist system. We have healthcare that works. And we have a capitalist system where our economy did not collapse in 2008 because we actually manage our banks fairly well. And so they didn't buy any of your crappy mortgage-backed securities.
And so, as an Australian, we're part of the Commonwealth and also part of that system, and our banks didn't collapse either.
I know. It's perfect, right? And you would know something about banks.
So, Michael, it sounds like your connection's better now. Do you want to...
Yeah, I switched. I was on a Linux laptop, and it's terrible, but
open source.
I love Xubuntu. I love my laptop, but Hangouts doesn't work. So I just wanted to say one comment. Joshua, you mentioned Open Contrail and being on their advisory board.
Yeah.
And, we're having a lot of debate around overlay networks and whether they're actually required. And we're sort of now leaning towards they're not. And I think it's going to be an interesting space to watch. And the little part of the bank that we work for, and we're now much more leaning towards open source, not commercial, which I think is a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, why did you find that overlays not required?
Sorry, what was that?
Why is it that you found overlays not required?
We just think that they add a significant amount of software complexity, and we're trying to aim for simplicity. So, if you're looking at an OpenStack plus Cloud Foundry plus overlay, you've got a huge amount of software. They all have to interact, and it's basically trying to minimize the layers of software complexity so that we can. That's not going to end well. And we also think that distributed load balancers, distributed firewalls, in a service discovery mechanism. And I know, Joshua, you love console. That's where I think we need to get to. Software-based service discovery, distributed systems, and get away from overlays, get away from load balancers, physical load balancers, physical firewalls.
Yeah. I'd say the only thing that disturbs me about Open Contrail right now is the software itself is equally good at layer 2 and layer 3. But the folks running the project have some very strong religious opinions about what size of layer 2 domain you should have and where you should route versus where you should switch. And particularly, they believe that you should never span a layer 2 domain across 2 racks. They don't like, and I don't entirely disagree with them. I just think expecting people to change their physical network topology to map an SDN rollout is a big jump for a lot of organizations, and I think software could do more than that. So I'm optimistic that as the Open Contrail community grows, and I know Reliance is now a big member, AT&T is now a big member, so we're starting to get some heavyweights in here. There's going to be some new packaging of that software that's going to make it a lot more flexible to do things with.
It's certainly a concern about Contrail is community size. Like, I lurk in the IRC all the time, and it's very quiet. And I think that all of the new, I've been following all of the networking debates on Docker, and it's fascinating. So Soccer Plane versus Rancher versus Weave. It's going to be fun to watch how that comes out. But again, it's sort of almost anti-overlay, all of that Docker networking stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's sort of what we did, did for another big New York institution that I probably shouldn't name, our buddy Justin, with the MVRP driver. You know, I was super optimistic about saying, hey, look, if you've got VLANs and you love VLANs and all you need is a really easy software to tell VLAN which hosts need to be connected and which ports on which host all the way to the hypervisor, MVRP is perfect. The reality is that not enough vendors believe in that story to make it viable, right? So this is sort of like the OpenStack or Cloud Foundry thing. We need a community that believes in it and a technology that's good enough, and we need those two things to sort of happen at the same time. We've got that with CF. We got that with OpenStack, although Schaefer will point out that the tech wasn't really what we wanted, but the community was really strong. Open Contrail is sort of the reverse of the OpenStack thing. The tech's really strong, the community's not quite there yet. So we'll see.
Yeah, I like Michael's views on things. I always said, like, hey, really this direction we're going is distributed resource management, scheduling, and service discovery. Like, it's not about virtualization. Like, those are very different concepts than virtualization. And, like, when I get up every day, I think, like,
sorry,
that's what the future is really about. And it's, like, that has been a good North Star for me for the last year and hasn't let me down as new things have come out. So it's an interesting paradigm versus kind of what you know, like the past and purely, and that's where you wonder, what does OpenStack need to do in that environment, right? If it's about that, like so I've got a lot of learnings there. I'm glad Michael hopped in this week. Hopefully keep coming, keep us on our toes.
Yeah. Or is OpenStack even required?
I know you're not sure.
Yeah. I think there is a day in the future where containers mature to the point that putting container orchestration against bare metal is a safe idea. And I think certainly if you're using CF, it's already kind of reasonable in that if there was code that was maliciously attacking the firmware, at least it would be obvious in the audit trail, right? It would have been CF pushed at some point. You could see what went into the capsule. But I don't think as a general container story where there I would be comfortable saying take your hypervisor away yet. The other thing is we still need the storage abstraction. You know, you still need software-defined storage, and frankly, OpenStack is a great way to roll that out.
Yeah, I agree. Storage is a huge missing part of the whole Docker story right now. But I expect that we'll have a better hardware security isolation story by the end of this year.
You think it'll be that fast?
Yeah.
I'm really curious if it's going to be what I'd like to see that I think would be a really clean break. Like if you really want to go like next gen, it would be a fail in place model for storage in the future. where as opposed to like the painful things you have to do with like the way we manage EBS volumes with Bosch through their life cycle, attach, detach, move it around. You're like, no, actually stop doing that. And that's really expensive because it could impose network latencies in a way on your topology that you don't want to have to deal with. So just let storage fail in place, and it's the app or the data services job to allow fail in place gracefully. I don't know. That seems cloudier to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm spending a lot of time right now trying to learn more about distributed storage, distributed file systems, all that sort of stuff, and I feel confident that all of that new, it's not really new, but all of that technology around distributed storage is going to be a real key part of this, because the idea, like to what you said, something fails, it should just reattach and have distributed system storage.
I'm pretty sure Rodrigo remembers Andrew's file system, because I sure do. Right.
There's only two places in the world that run it, though, John. Well, three. There's Morgan Stanley, everyone knows about them.
Yeah.
Stanford, and there's Goldman Sachs, and that's it.
There's a fourth, actually. There's a BC government office that I deployed it for in 2002, 2003, that it is still there, and it will never go away. So, yeah.
People love it, but it requires an all-in approach.
Yes.
I think we could keep talking all night, but Andrew, I think it's an hour and a half into this. So unless we're going to road trip to the other.
I had a question for you. Tell me about this little thing that Amazon announced that I'm curious, Lambda.
Oh, you missed the first part.
Rodrigo, you're late, man. We talked about Lambda.
Okay. I apologize. I'm late to the party.
It's Yahoo pipes for the next era.
How about if I bring some nice Australian Syrah and spend a week there? Would the lamb and the da and the Syrah go together?
Look, I mean, I think one thing I will say, like, Amazon's awesome, and it's cool how integrated they are, and I think, like, that level of integration, like, the thing that I always, when I'm on the road, what I tell people about is, like, Cloud Foundry is so different because we integrate lifecycle management, containers, routing, all of these things, we integrate them for you, and that allows us to add recombinant kind of synthetic value on top of all of those individual components. So I really respect what Amazon did with Lambda, but we did a thing with real-time intelligence where we were taking the real-time feed over in Europe for a major provider over there of every event that happened on the cell tower and allowing people to subscribe using Spring XD to all of those events so that you could kick off anything else. We had a whole programming model for that whole telco that we built to subscribe to every event in the cell tower, which, hey, if you're about to drop a highly valued customer, send them an apology, or kick off another customer. We've done that. It's just hand-built. I think it's cool that Amazon's starting to try to bring that paradigm to their cloud infrastructure, so like an S3 bucket then, it comes pre-published with that paradigm, but
it's not stream processing like the Lambda architecture stuff so much. It's more like stored procedures on all your data in Amazon.
No, but I think highly integrated events is the paradigm that's interesting to me. Is like, how do you think about all the events happening across your whole system and then take an action based off those events?
But I don't, at least maybe I could dig deeper because I haven't actually built anything with Lambda, but I don't think you get access to the event so much as you get to say, if this happens, do this thing. It's a trigger more than like you're actually processing in a stream of events.
No, but I guess what I'm saying, Andrew, is the interesting thing about what we built was the if this, then do that kind of hooks that were at the end of that, not so much the stream processing.
I got it.
Those final hooks.
You guys are basically saying the same thing, except you're talking about sex. Andrew's talking about sex, and you're talking about DOM. We just bring it back to the XSLT model right here.
It's all about the homoiconic data formats.
Right, man. Single assignment for the win.
So we're about 90 minutes into this thing. If anyone has any parting wisdom, but we'll call it, and then everyone have a good week, and we'll do it again next week.
Amy? Abby?
Yeah, it was great to have some new people on. Michael, Amy, Abby.
Well, hold on a second. No. Let's not do that. Amy, come on. You're smart. You have a following. Tell us what the hell we're doing wrong here.
I think it's the sex analogies. I don't think they're selling.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will change.
Nobody likes to buy herpes.
Well, that's the point. I don't need people to buy herpes from Amazon when they could buy safe sex from water.
So he's
No,
herpes and
that's the
condoms.
one problem, Josh, is like neither herpes nor safe sex sells. So
No, that's
Amy,
like
take us away.
Haas is
Somebody told me sex sells, but I'm clearly doing it wrong.
Haas
I think
is an
this is a
avocado,
sign.
not
I
a
think this is
platform.
a sign that we should all call it a night
Yeah.
and go back to whatever we're doing.
Nobody likes
No,
that.
we can't call it a night. I want to hear from Amy. I want to hear from Abby.
Amy's got to give us a word of wisdom.
Wait, no, hold on a second. I want to hear from Amy and I want to hear from Abby. Reinvent, man. I'm a little tired of the sausage fest. Okay.
All right, so the ladies get the last word, and then we'll call it.
Always, if you're wise.
A secure platform is a good platform. I'm all about security, and I think that's a key part of our story for 2015.
Hey, Amy, what's a smart container?
One that keeps its mouth
Don't make
shut.
fun of it. It's a thing.
Sorry, Amy and Abby are right next to each other. Abby, what is a smart container?
A smart container takes your standard run-of-the-mill container, adding orchestration, scalability, and automation. It's a thing.
Actually, guys, James, you need to come to Oakland.
Right now.
Well, hold on a second. We use this word containers. Did you know that the containers were invented here in Oakland by American President Airlines, APL? So if you really, want to get to the damn fucking thing, excuse my language, come to Oakland and see the container port of Oakland, which is where the whole container concept was originally invented. It's right across the bay.
And you can get
Rodrigo has spoken. We're gonna go to Oakland, and with that, I'm gonna cut us off, and we can keep chatting. But we're gonna
All
stop.
right, so just next meeting for this thing.
I
And go
appreciate
Waters,
it.
field trip.